All right, and we are live. Okay. I'm just going to post this to Facebook and Discord since YouTube doesn't do its job and tell people that I'm live. So yeah, how about I do what I've been promising in the name? Might take a little while. Let's see. I'll just do I'm live in all caps for Facebook because they don't care about the tier list except for Cam. And then Discord will definitely care about this if they see it. So maybe they'll see it soon. Okay. Great. Oh, that's not very good. Didn't just like post the link. Share. Ah, there we go. Video link. Oh. Copy. Oh. The copy logo's not obvious. Oh my goodness. We have a person here. Hello, person. You're very special. You're the first person to get me to talk about the tier list that I posted the other day. That was a really fun one. I'm going to start by talking about something else special about 15 that I noticed. So here's my this list of long reasons will turn into a video, but I think the most confident choices that I have. Oh, I actually need to pull up my own tier list so that I know which tiers I put everything in. So as I was making it, oh damn it, you're gone. Well, as I was making it, I realized that I don't really despise any tuning. I think they're just tools for people to use. So that's why the tiers are so hilarious. And there's 4 S tiers. Because as I was making these, I was like, C tier, B tier? I haven't explored these things. I don't know them. I don't know that there's not potential there. In fact, if there's anything I do know, it's that there's probably loads of potential there. Hold on, I'm going to post this to Discord. See if I can get Discord to load on my computer. Okay. There we go. So there's a bunch of potential in these tunings, right? That's what I know. So that's why I completely shifted the framework. And the categorization I like to use to think of it is that, like, there's 4 S tiers at the top. And then, like, those are pretty narrowly competing for each other. They're all great things to use. And then the A tier also has great things to use. And then there's the C tier and the F tier, which are completely different categories. So the C tier is reserved for things that are overdone or that I personally don't care to use, since it's a very personal thing. And, I don't hate 7 EDO or anything. I just feel like it's so small and there are so few possibilities that in most circumstances I would use something else. And I've mostly just been using it whenever I have something that's major or minor and I want to just flatten it to neutral with everything. And I think categorically it's really interesting to do that. And 7 EDO is also really important because it permeates a lot of other tunings and their logic. And I also feel like I know enough about tunings now that whenever I want to change minor or major tonalities to neutral tonalities, I have more options that are richer and allow real chromaticism that 7 doesn't. Yes, Harry, you already on C tier. Because I skipped the top ones. But I'll be talking about the top ones. Okay, so we talked about 7. 7 and 8 are really similar. I feel like I hear a lot of the resources that they have in other places, and they're small. So they run out of possibilities really fast. So I'm personally just not interested in using them again. But that doesn't mean that they're bad or that other people shouldn't use them. In fact, I think I would highly recommend both of them to newcomers because 5 and 7 tone equal temperaments provide really important frameworks for understanding some simple scales that you can't get in 12 tone equal temperament that are really culturally important. So, 7 might even be more important than 8 for that reason. And you can think of 8 as just a subset of 24. And then, of course, I put 12 and 24 there because they also, as well, are overdone. But, 24 is important. All these are important. Um, just like, I trust other people to get to 24. What's really interesting is, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but a lot of David Fiozinski's music uses 24, but it's like really zen. So, that's a good opus of or corpus of music to go to if somebody says quarter tones can't be zen. Well, David Fiozinski's music is right there. Although some of it does use 72. Okay, so we talked about C tier. Then I think the F tier is relatively obvious from my C tier logic. It's not only tunings that are too small to be chromatic, but also are subsets of 12-tone equal temperament. So they're even more overdone and contain even less possibilities than all of the other ones that are higher up. So that's where we are with that one. Okay, now that there are people here, let me post this in Discord really fast. Let's see. And unlike on Facebook, I can just post a link and people will show up. Okay, great. Let's talk about those top tier ones. By the way, I love audience participation. So if you're in the chat and you've got some thoughts, please say stuff like, no, you're wrong, and that's stupid. Okay, it's good for my engagement. Okay, let's talk about the SS plus tier, the coveted tier. We've got 15, we've got 19, we've got 26, we've got 37, and we've got 72. So let's start with 15. This may be repeat information for you. If you are on the Discord and you just, if you saw any of the interactions I had in the Discord yesterday, thank you, Gal. That's perfect. Thank you for the engagement. 15 is a very special tuning for a lot of reasons. And I don't consider almost any of them regular temperament theory related, which I guess is its own reason. Because lots of times when people are like, this tuning's special, this tuning's not special, it might just because it approximates just intervals. It's not that simple. There's more to it. But that's often, I think, the starting point for a lot of people. And I actually find myself a lot more drawn to tunings that maybe don't approximate just intonation well. And, it might be interesting to have tunings that approximate just intonation so poorly that they cause drifting that forces Zen harmonic structures. And you can only get this with tunings that are, small in a certain way because their closest approximations wouldn't add up correctly. But of course, in larger tunings, you can always make the intentional decision to create those Zen harmonic structures too. So after a while, as Ivor Derrick says, around 45 or 55 notes, tunings start to sort of lose their individual character, and it gets more iffy to rate them because they're just so similar. But 72 is at the top, which I'll explain in a second. Here are the reasons that 15 is a special tuning. It's bad on paper, great in life. That's not super special, but it's so great in life that it really makes the idea that people think it's bad on paper very silly. So there's a huge disparity there, right? It's like the quintessential bad on paper, great in life tuning. If you ask the wrong ratio person about it, they'd be like, oh, don't try 15. It's fifths are out of tune. But, it's a great tuning to try, as we'll get to. It's the last tuning system, the last equal temperament where a white-black keyboard layout alternating is valid from a piano player's perspective. What I mean by that is that if you have an equal temperament that is an odd number, you can create a keyboard layout just by starting on a white key, going to a black key, and then alternating back and forth, which is a little bit simplistic because then it doesn't give you good fingering for crossing from black keys to black keys, but it does make a lot of positions really, really similar. And at 15, it is a borderline of playability, assuming that you don't add any other stickers or other things, which I don't believe in doing because I'm not a guitar player. I'm a piano player. 15 tet has 7 black keys and 8 white keys in that layout, the porcupine layout. And you can just barely subitize and count the number of black keys correctly before, there might be some equal temperaments where if you did that, you wouldn't be able to count the number of black keys, and so you can't find your place. But 15 tet is not only the last one where that is possible, and also a borderline. I find myself missing it, but not with 13. Um, 17 and 19 are also diatonic right out of the gate as the next odd ones, which makes it even more special from a piano layout perspective. Because even if you tried to do the alternating white-black odd equal tuning layout for 17 and 19, they would still be less easy to navigate than a diatonic system. So 15 is truly the last, and I love that about it. Here's the third thing I love. This is also about piano layout. That third thing is that the porcupine piano layout as sort of a borderline is not actually that great of a piano solution, because I think when I'm looking for a way to play something on microtonal piano, it might not be exactly the same as something from 12-tone equal temperament, but I do want some of the shapes to line up at least if possible, and I want to avoid double black keys unless it's for the purposes of diatonicism. And 15 doesn't really have a neat, clear, tidy piano solution, unless pseudo-diatonic scales turn out to be the answer. I still haven't tried it yet, so I need to actually do that in order to have the experience to address it. But the idea is that, like, if you go through all the equal temperaments, maybe up to like 24, because I don't want to play, past 24 on one where I've just rearranged all the keys like I do in my videos. If you haven't seen them, you're behind. Every single one kind of has like an obvious solution where it's the most like piano, except 15. 15 has like a porcupine solution, a Hansen solution, and a pseudo-diatonic solution that all are about equally painful, which make it an interesting challenge. But for all the other ones, there's a really obvious solution. Some of them are mod MOSs, which is funny. 10 has the most obvious solution because the only real albatonic scale it has is die-cut 7, which means that its solution in terms of white keys is to have some white keys that are all like next to each other. So that's why Elaine Walker has shaved down her white keys in order to create that. But I've gotten around that in a variety of ways whenever I've played in 10. But I think I wrote down what my actual solution was. So 10 is another interesting one like 15 then, actually. Okay, next reason. It's the only equal temperament above 12-tone equal temperament with no real major second. And I love this because it completely forces me to rethink how I should write things with major seconds in them, because the major second is so fundamental. A lot of times, I mean, the major second is so fundamental that it's nicknamed the tone, right? So, to not have it is a really, really beautiful microtonal challenging constraint that I love trying to get around. And there's ways to substitute for it with its 2 flavors of major seconds, right? So you can do that. Okay, I can see that people are leaving because I'm just talking about 15. So maybe I'll shorten this part. Okay, you can also, on the piano, on the 15-tone piano, still kind of barely reach an octave with average size hands, which almost makes it possible to play like a 12-tet keyboard. So I love that about it. There's 2 valid notations for it. Most equal temperaments have 1, or it's up for debate, highly. And with 15, since there's 2, there's like not enough data, I think, to really say which one is better. And people disagree about it. That's really the interesting thing about it, I think, is that there's like a lot of equal temperaments, they have solutions for notation behind them, and people might disagree about which one to use. But because I know what performers want to see, they'll want to see 12N tunings whenever they can. Like, it's fairly obvious to me what the solutions to those are, assuming that you want to understand the intervals of the system at all. So there's some people who might take a complex tuning system like 46 and be like, oh, just notate it in cents. Then you don't understand any of the intervals, but you could technically derive each one. It's the intervallic equivalent of missing the forest for the trees. So there's kind of a weird balance there where like people either just want to see the trees, or they don't want to provide something useful to someone that can be shorthand. Um, and I genuinely don't know with 15 whether native fifth notation is better than being a subset of 60 tone equal temperament. It should be straightforward. It should be easy, and a subset of 60 should be the thing to use. But the microtonalists who use 12 times an integer to write microtonal music almost never use 60. The biggest example I can think of is Creo. So it's not overdone enough to warrant like us building a whole big subset notation off of it for maybe like 10, 15, 20, 30. Although that would be nice. You could clear it out in one fell swoop, and then 20 and 30 would look a lot less nasty. So that's an entirely completely interesting issue that no one will talk about except for me. Easily Blackwood's favorite. That one's kind of obvious. Blackwood 10 is at the edge of tonality because it has 10 notes. But if you analogize a diatonic scale to it, you get like 7 out of the 10. I think it's really strange to try and put a diatonic scale in a tuning and then realize that in order to fill in all the possibilities of what it should do, you get 10 notes and you get this completely new geometry. I think that's a more Zen harmonic take on diatonic ideas than having a 7-note scale with slightly different intonation. Things like that. Which, you could say porcupine scale might be sort of like that, but, any 7-note scale, really. It has Blackwood and porcupine, and those are two of the most opposite and unique microtonal scales ever. Ooh, I accidentally raised 2 fingers. And here's one that I thought of today that I'm going to write down. And that is, see, I have this little note on my phone where I write these things down. Oh my gosh, there's 4 people. Hi, people. So we're talking about how 15 is in the top tier. Exaggerates the syntonic comma distance the most. And by that I mean, there's a certain logical thing that you can do in a lot of tuning systems where, like, if you're in it, you have, like, a Pythagorean major triad, and in order to get the true major triad, you'll need to lower the major third. Maybe a degree or 2 degrees or something like that. And usually that distance from taking the Pythagorean major third to the major third is a small distance that's a little tweak. And I think the attitude I see a lot of people take is that if your writing is clever enough, you can sort of get around that and get people to not notice it. I would like people to notice it, like Kyle Gann explicitly stated on my podcast. Outside voices, baby. But if you've got a little microtone, that's got a certain feel, right? That's got kind of a small shifting feel that a lot of Westerners might not be used to. But in 15, that distance is 80 cents. 80 cents. So if you use your standard microtonal logic of having like a Pythagorean major third and lowering it to get a major chord, it forces you to take something that you've known to be true for so long in 12-tone equal temperament and just exaggerate the heck out of it. And I really love that. It's basically making it a semitone. I don't know of many other tunings that do that. I mean, I know other tunings could accomplish something similar, especially if you took subsets of them. But I don't know a tuning that forces it based on how small it is and where the approximations would end up. And I think that is just great. Specifically because like 12-tone equal temperament music is built in with the assumption of having the syntonic comma tempered out. So when it's not, you might have to do different things. But if someone were to do this with like, 22 or 27 or 34, they could do it in a certain way where that syntonic comma distance could be hidden, but not with 15 because it's literally a semitone. It's beautiful. So that's why 15 tone is SS plus tier to me. Let's move on to the next one. Ooh, now that we've got 5 people, tell your friends. I'm deleting this one after because it's just a bunch of numbers. Hi, Romeos. How are you doing? Okay, next one in SS plus tier is 19. I should say that these two in the SS plus tier, 15 and 19, they come from me playing the guitars that I have as well and noticing that they're fun to play and that the logic is a little bit of a tweak. And I just don't know that I get the same feeling from 17 or 22. 22 has so many frets that it's a lot for me. So I definitely don't enjoy playing in 22 as like an act of improvisational freedom or an intuitive act. But I do enjoy like arranging for 22 guitar for the logistical challenge of it and like being able to play it. I think that's a really interesting hill to climb. But 15 and 19, I can just kind of dive in. Here's why 19 is SS plus tier. It is easier to get musicians to play 19 tone equal temperament in a lot of circumstances than quarter tones. And I think that might be a controversial statement to say. I don't have as much experience with it as I should, which is true for all these things. But um, musicians that I know who just work in 12 tone equal temperament, they don't want to see microtonal accidentals at all. So the fact that 19 doesn't have any microtonal accidentals, but you just have to tell them that the diatonic scale is a little bit different is perfect. And I've also seen musicians who are willing to dip their toes into microtonality with me and something will happen. And that thing is that they're scared of trying it because they haven't done it before and they're afraid that they're going to be wrong. And every time that we try 19 together, they immediately pick it up faster than difficult music in 12 tet with like jazz chords in it, right? So 19 is easy to pick up. It's fun. The microtonal accidentals make sense. You can do normal progressions in it. People like that too. It's nice to be able to just say, here, you can do normal progressions in it. Because some people don't think that can happen, even though we've told them 500 times. It doesn't matter how many times you tell them. It won't sink in. Every 10 years, everybody forgets. But anyway, you can do that with 19, and it's great. And 19 is exactly the right intonation such that it can accomplish that and still feel close enough to 12 to work. 26, I don't know if it can pull that off, but we'll get to that in a minute. So one more thing that 19 does that I also love is it's oft stated that 19 tones MOS scales are not easy to work with because they're not small. And that's great too, because it's a compositional constraint that forces you to get around the logic of the microtonal community composition technique starter pack, which is just to have an MOS and then use it. Well, if 19 makes that not easy, you kind of have to think outside of the box. Also, this is really random, but it's really flat 7/4 interval is great in a similar way to how 15 tone syntonic comma being almost a semitone or basically a semitone is great because like it forces you to really hear a difference between those two shades even though neither of them are exactly where you want them to be, which again is very non-JI and I'm a fan of that. So 15 and 19 are definitely SS plus tier. You could argue with me about 26 and 37, which we'll get to in a second. Okay, so people are saying stuff. What about 26? The one tuning I'd like to try on a physical instrument. 19. Yeah, I'd recommend it. You could probably, it's easier to fake 19 on a 12 instrument than to fake 15. But 15's categories make sense. I've found that I can pick up 15 if I think of 5 tone equal temperament and going around that because the categories for 5 I think are easy to find. Like it's a lot easier to just like sing a 5 tone equal tempered scale than a 7 tone equal tempered scale. Let's see. In 22, the syntonic comma not being tempered out kind of feels like a nuisance. Interesting. 19 is probably the best for people taking the Zen pill for the first time. Yeah, it could be. And Godzilla is such a cool scale structure. Yes. I love the Godzilla scale. In fact, I think I might love it too much because I've inordinately done quite a few videos on it, but it's gone under different names each time. So like, you know, the Enneatonic scale is one name for it, and Superstar Saga used that in his popular like Sunrise or Sun's Rise song, and then I covered it, and that was like the first time I used that. It wasn't mixed correctly, but you know. And then I had the Sound and Music, Do Re Mi, but the children steal the guitar so that they can play the Enneatonic scale. That's the Godzilla scale. That's the same thing. And then I played Godzilla in Godzilla. So I just love the Godzilla scale. It's really great. Not a lot of major and minor chords in it. All, you know, like sub minor and super major. It's really warpy. It's just, it's delicious. In fact, I have 2 Sound and Music videos in 19 using that scale. Okay. 9 EDO. That's a really good one. All right. Next up, we are getting to 26. So the reason 26 is SS plus tier is because in my mind, it has the greatest disparity of microtonal reactions versus like normal people reactions. I know that can be a silly dichotomy, but here's what I mean by that. I mean that there's tuning systems where like you play some music for someone and you know that because they're microtonal, they're going to be like, oh, I like the super major thirds in this. I like the sharp fifths in this. Maybe this is 27, you know. They have some educated guesses about what's going on. Now, if you show it to a musician, If they don't like it, they might pretend like they can't hear the intervals, even though they'll be able to on the first try because they have some training. But it'll definitely affect them powerfully. If they want to frame that as bad, then I feel sorry for them, I guess. But there's that kind of reaction too, right? So there's like an educated reaction, and then there's kind of like a reaction where someone knows what is going on but hasn't studied the language to describe it. And then there's kind of just like a standard reaction from people. And I think the standard reactions you get from people who are just kind of living their daily lives, they definitely range a lot more drastically sometimes than musicians, because like people who have chosen to not be like get into music, they have reactions that are, I think, strongly based on their musicality and their fear of the unknown. And when I show 26 tone equal temper music to people of all shades of musicality and fear of the unknown as well, when I show them things in 26, there seems to be almost a universally positive reaction. And then the microtonalists like seem to want to complain because the fifth is too flat. And so I'm wondering how much of that is not manufactured exactly, but like it's so weird to me that you could have a tuning and present it to someone, and someone who knows more about it would be like, "Oh, I don't like that because it's too flat tone for me." And then like, some other people that I know who I won't name because I don't want to like insult their musicality. I showed it to them and they're like, "Oh, that's really pretty." You know? And that's just that's the thing you wanted them to say for so long, and they just, they haven't acknowledged it until you show them the right thing. It might have taken like 12 things, and they might still think of the other 11 things that sounded out of tune to them as the microtonal ones because of the awful, awful way that people categorize this music. But it doesn't matter in the end. You got it. You did it. You achieved something with 26, which is that the microtonalist complained, but everyone else was like, "This is great." And I always knew that 26 was diatonically special like that when I first started. Actually, here, let me show you something really fast. Not my soda. Degenerate stuff. Ugh. Okay. Here we go. My room is a disgrace right now. All right, so check this out, gang. These stickers on my keyboard are a very, very old system of taped on stickers I had. And this is back when I didn't know I was interested enough to work on my own layouts. And so what I did was I was using the Halberstadt keyboard to remap and play everything. And those stickers are letters showing the notations of various equal temperaments that I had been told about and that I wanted to explore. And the ones that are on there are 31, 19, 17, and 26. And I think I was just always drawn to 26 early on, but then I never explored it enough. And then when I got back into it, I was like, wow, this is crazy. So I think sometimes 26 can feel like 19 because of the accidental structure and how it's composed. Like, it's easy to kind of think of where the accidentals go, although it's way more microtonal than 19. And I think it would be harder for a casual musician who just wants to jump in to immediately get the hang of it. Okay. Oh, also, 26 has 13 in it. So whenever you do whole tone scale stuff, not only is there 13 tone equal temperament in it, but it also has that like mystical connection to whole tony sounds, and you can exploit that, or you can make it sound like the glacial 7 scale. It's freaking amazing. Yes, basic one ira tonic. Exactly. Freaking based basic one ira tonic. Another thing about 26 that is really amazing. Oh, I've forgotten it. Where is it gone? It's gone right out of my head. I can take this opportunity to look at the comments. Let's see. We got people saying that 26 isn't flat enough. Very good. Yes. Part of the process of becoming Zen is gravitating toward JI. Yeah, that does make sense. Let's see. Benjamin says, I often feel the whole tone is very important in the tuning as it strongly influences melodic movement. The whole tone in 26 is very on point. Yes, I also feel like the whole tone scales are very important, especially how they deviate from 6 and how you might want to use that in your own music. Okay, I'm trying to think of that last 26 thing that I was going to say. Oh, yeah! The specific reason that I used it in my I'll Be Seeing You cover, that is a really important song to me. Um, the specific reason I used it in my I'll Be Seeing You cover is that, like, the augmented fourth is the same as the 11/8. So you finally have a tuning that can sound diatonic but really flat tone, but it's so flat tone that, the augmented fourth and the 11/8 work, so that you could get like do 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 do, and like if you do F C B C, it's low enough that it counts categorically in that spot, and you don't have to alter it. Because I wanted so badly for the melody in that song to be the same and to use the same diatonic categories, but I also wanted that 11/8 sound, and 26 had it. So it was after something very specific. So yeah, 26 is really exciting. Okay, great. Next one, 37. 37 breaks music notation. It's absolutely broken. It's a very small equal temperament for, what you guys like to do. And what happens is, how we talked about in 22 and 15, how like if you have a Pythagorean major chord, you can alter the major third and lower it by 1 degree to get the closest major chord. And then you can use that. And that's logic that you see in a lot of tuning systems that one should be familiar with. Benjamin's going to be back in 20. Probably not. But I hope so. That'd be really fun. I have lots of stuff to do this morning, but I'm relatively caught up, so I can also justify randomly streaming. So here's why 37 is special. You know how in 15 we have an alteration where we get from like a Pyth major third to a major third, and it's like a semitone away. In 37, its closest like Pyth major third is 2 alterations away from its closest major third because it's so sharp. And you can also utilize Stein-Zimmermann accidentals, or half sharps and half flats, the Western ones, to split the chromatic semitone in half. And this means that the rules for generating ups and downs and adding half flats and sharps to them in order to reduce the number of arrows you might see in a helpful way is categorically not helpful in 37. So it is a puzzle and a special case where one might want to break the rules in order to get triads to be more readable. Also, every time I've heard someone do something in 37, it sounded different, which is another really great quality. And I think 26 is like that too. Now, I've seen things in 15 and 19 that I think sound similar enough that most people might gravitate towards similar structures for those. But 26 and 37 definitely seem really wild. I think 23 is like that too. And it might even be more zen than 26 or perhaps 37. Although there are more possibilities in the higher tunings. This is something that's kind of crazy, is like in the higher tunings, there's more possibilities, but see, people seem to gravitate towards certain particular ones. And so those are the ones that I think of when I'm analyzing these tunings. But of course, you could come up with other crazy stuff. Like who's done anti-diatonic in 31? Has that been done yet? I feel like it hasn't, but it should be. So I should say that out of all these tunings at the top, the one that I've had the least experience with is 37. And 37 is actually like such a good tuning that every time I've tried it and I've tried to write something with it and kind of figure it out, I've been like, this isn't good enough for 37. And it's the only tuning that I've had that thought about. So I want to get really deep into it. And of course, it's a prime number too, so that makes it interesting. It's absolutely awful to play on the lumitone in a diatonic layout because of that double alteration. A lot of the other ones in the higher range you can kind of withstand, and they might feel like 22, but 37 does not. And so if you're trying to get its closest major chords with a normal Pythagorean layout, you're in a huge pickle. So very interesting tuning. One that feels a little bit impenetrable to me, that is super special in a way that the other ones do not. Okay, 72. 72 is really obvious. It's like the ideal miracle temperament. So not only are the temperament fans raving about it, but it's also used in contemporary classical music. And if you write for an advanced academic ensemble nowadays, you can assume 72 tet notation in Minari Sims, provided you check with the performer. So it's the lingua franca of practicing microtonalists in that sphere. So I think it's so SS plus tier that you could take lots of microtonal music that is Zen that you want people to play in 72, and you could try translating it. I know Pedro Finisterra is doing that as part of his doctoral thesis, which is very exciting. So that really makes it SS plus tier in my mind. It's just so usable. And even though it lines up with 12 and it's a 12N, it's so big that you could Zenify it if you want. You could write something that was secretly like an 11 tet in 72, and then you could like give the performers little instructions if you wanted to be super specific about the intervals and which ones didn't line up with other ones. Like you'd say, like, make this sound like a minor third, or whatever you need to do, provided you understand the material. And I think in that way, since it's so big and so easy to use as a 12N, it is a lot better than other 12 times an integer microtonal tunings that people very oftentimes will either use in a not very Zen harmonic way or in a way that lines up with 12 a lot. But in 72, I feel like that constraint has been, alleviated just through sheer size. One of the parameters that determine my rating is how composite the EDO is. The less composite, the more unique mosses it has. Very good. Yeah, this is why 9 EDO has 3 octave period mosses, while 12 EDO is 1. Yeah, exactly. 9 EDO's got so much for its small size. Okay, let's run through all the other ones really fast. All right, SS tier 20 is really freaking cool, but since it's kind of composite, like you mentioned, it doesn't get a lot of attention. I feel like it's really hard to translate any kind of melody from 12 into 20 and have it sound normal. It's almost impossible. With a lot of these other tunings, if it's high enough, you can do that. And so 20 is particularly high numbered and particularly impossible to do that with in a way that I find satisfying. Also, its 5 EDO framework makes it surprisingly easier to audiate than you would expect, even though it doesn't have any kind of diatonic layout. So it's really strange, and I enjoy playing it on the electric guitar. It's so fun that I'm willing to accept the fact that it has a lot of frets. Which Discord server? Oh, I was talking about the microtonal one. So I posted in general that I was here. 23, really Zen. I made the observation like 8 or 7 years ago that 14 and 23 were some of the most Zen ear training tunings that you could come up with. And then, very validatingly, when Matthew Sheeran and I were working on acoustic microtonal, he mentioned that 14 and 23 were the ones that had to be retuned the most. And I confirmed this with him, comparing the 12th tet and the non-12th tet files. So I think I'm very proud to have called that one. Out of all of the things I've called, let's see. Here are the trends that I've called in history. I called that everyone would make fun of Papyrus like Comic Sans 6 years early. I also called that in pop music, people are going to be talking about but, so you had the YouTube videos popularizing the Tresillo. And then I also, like 7 years ago, called that 14 and 23 were the most Zen ear training wise. And then Easily Blackwood's microtonal etudes proved me right. But, that is a very narrow case. Could be a coincidence. Okay, 31. It's really, really consonant. Compact for the amount of possibilities it allows, and the notation is really, really smooth. It's smooth as butter, and you can do a lot of overtone series stuff with it. It's pretty great. It's got a lot of possibilities, and of course, the online space is totally 31 pilled right now, which I love. It's so 31 pilled that I asked Adam Neely on Instagram if he would ever do microtones again, and he said, no, too much for me, but maybe if I did, I'd do 31. And so I'd like to say that Levi and Zia and a certain other person, they all put their power rings together and they were like, let's 31 this place. And they did it. It's great. It's just like 22, 7 years ago. I'm old. Okay, 40 and 47 and the SS tier are just based flat tones. That's all you need to know there. I've personally worked with 40 quite a bit, and I love it because it has 20 inside it. Yay. And 47, I've been working with only in personal experiments so far, but it really twists notation so far that it's kind of having me rethink how I'm used to flat tone notations. It's really challenging. Okay, S plus. We have 5, 10, 14, 16, 17, 18, 22, 27, 29, 34, 46, and 50. So a lot of these I felt like are really great tunings that I feel like I may have explored a lot, or I understand the possibilities of them, or paradoxically, tunings that I feel like I haven't explored as much. So I feel like I've explored 5, 10, 14, 16, and 17 a lot, so that takes care of the first few. And 5 is really agreeable. What I mean by that is I specifically put 5 higher on this list because you can. It's just like with 26 earlier, but to a much lesser extent. It's not universal. Well, there's not a disparity, is what I mean. Like 5 is so agreeable that you can play music in 5-tone equal temperament for just anyone, and they might not even consider it Zen. They might just be like, oh, that's really pleasant. That's a great pentatonic scale. You know what I mean? And that makes it slightly less special than 26 in that way, but it also is a really special quality on its own, like that you can just do that. In fact, one time I showed someone that who wasn't a musician, but who like kind of knows what scales are, and he was like, "Oh, keep doing that. Keep playing in like major." So he diagnosed it as major, but it was just straight up 5-tone equal temperament. So it's an extremely agreeable tuning. 10 has a similar vein, and it has one albatonic scale, which makes it really cool. And I think the way that Elaine Walker has used it has really sort of exposed people to the possibilities of what it can do in a triadic context. 14 is obviously very, very zen. It's fun to play around with. It has a great little neat sense of internal logic that feels like you can map it all out, kind of like 15. But it's not as special as 15, but it's still really special for how zen it is. 16 is great. You can notate it as a subset of 48. So very helpful tuning in that way. Let's see. Prefer 9 Edias Mavilla to 16 Edias. Oh, that's really interesting. Is it because you want that flatter fifth? I really like 16 Edias Mavilla sounds more like a diatonic scale or a warped one than 9 Edios does. And 9 Edios fifth, that 666 cent fifth, it's so sour. It just takes your ear and goes, it's beautiful. I love it so much. I honestly want to use it more. That's why I'm looking forward to exploring more in 18. Another tuning on here. Yes, being flat-coded. I'm totally flat-coded as well. And yet I still love 5. Hey, maybe the 480 cent fourth can be a really flat fifth or something. Everything can be anything if you try hard enough. There was some comment that someone said to me the other day that made me think like, wow, you have really stretchy ears. Like they basically said like one interval was another one, but not in a way where they were like just getting it wrong. Like they were just totally I don't know, rough coded. What do you call it where it's coded? Because like you're willing to say that like one interval kind of sounds like another interval 30 or 40 cents away. Who knows? I don't know. Okay. 17. Great tuning. I feel like a lot of the stuff I want to do in it can be done in other tunings, but I really love the notational aspect, and I love how easy it is to pick up, and I love how much it can be applied to non-Western music, especially the stuff that's like diatonic scale, but with in-between notes that some people say can be approximated with 24. Again, I don't know the accuracy of a lot of those, and it's a very complicated issue, but I feel like 17 can sound like that a lot. It can do neutralese, which is what I call that in-between stuff. 22, great tuning. People usually use it really, really similarly. But I love it. I love the possibilities inherent in it, and I love its notational logic. It totally makes sense to me. 27 and 29 are really similar. I have similar feelings about 27 and 29 than 22. Like it's this great thing. It's got a sharp fifth. You can alter it to make the right major chord, but then like on paper, it almost looks really, really similar, and people use it in similar ways. Not that I don't love it for that, but I'd love to see more exploration. Let's see. We've got 34. Oh, 17, but you've got 5 limit stuff in there. That improves 17 at the expense of having a whole lot of heckin' notes. and making it maybe hard to play on the lumitone. I don't know. Now, fun fact, if you're on the lumitone and you've got a reasonable circle of fifths tuning, like 12 or 17 or 19, and you try and play that times 2, you have the choice of either creating an inconsistent mapping or inserting like another cracked row in between everything you're already playing. And I was thinking that I should do inconsistent layout stuff when I tried with 34, but then I saw Brian Deister playing in 38 with a cracked row formation, and I was like, maybe I just got to get used to cracked row formations, because then that would solve all the tunings that have a reasonable circle of fifths and then a crack, and I wouldn't have to do anything inconsistent, because I don't want to play inconsistently. Navigation trumps familiarity. That's what I'm saying. Let's see. Yuha says, well, the 980 fifth does sound very sour with some bright sounding instruments, but I'd be interested in whether some mellower instruments with fewer overtones can make the fifth sound better. Yuha, I think you'd be really interested in a song of mine called, oh, I should know this. This is sad. Popularity by brute force? Popularity with brute force? I don't remember the exact word, but it's on my Ignoring Years of Hindsight album. And it has a lot of really reedy, bright instruments, but I think the fifths sound usable. And that's because I'm using certain chords that might sound like inverted major sevenths, but with sort of the, with the right attack and everything, it sounds agreeable. Let me look up the title of it. It's a popularity through brute force. Popularity through brute force. And 9-tone equal temperament. That's my most recent song in 9, back when I had any time to compose. Okay, we've done 27. We've done 29. 34's there. 46 and 50. I love the notation stuff that I'm getting from these tunings, and I've worked with them a little bit. I haven't worked with 50 as much as I would like, but I love that 50 has 5 in it, but it's also got a really readable diatonic scale. So I might actually put that higher in SS if I were to redo this and have more experience. The other thing is that, like, a lot of these tunings I don't have as much experience in other ones, so maybe I just should have put the ones down where I'm like, yes, I really know that this is the tier that this is supposed to be in, but it seems more fun to include more of them. Okay, so that's S+. Now S tier, 9 is great. Abnormality was pointing out that it still does major and minor, but it's small. So I think he kind of thinks it's special for the reasons that I think 15 is special, because I consider 15 the first major minor triad one after 12. And so before 12, you really only have 9, if you count that and are very generous. And I think it's possible to sort of make it work, but you have to be pretty clever. 11, of course, is, super zen on its own. 13, same kind of thing. I like 13, I think, more than 11. Not that 11 is bad, but I think in 11, it's harder to provide closure than in 13. But that actually makes it a really interesting writing challenge. Whenever I've had to resolve 11, I often use the fifths in different registers and timbres so that it can still sound fifty. Or I'll use the super major third as, an implied major chord, or a sub minor third. Well, wait, no, just a minor third as an implied minor chord, whatever you'd call the minor third in 11. I've done some really interesting experiments with 13 that have been divisive. Like, I have this thing on SoundCloud that is an unfinished composition called Opposites of Habit, where I wrote this cool 13 sort of chorale texture, and it's beautiful, but it's really zen. And it does that thing in 13 where, since the fifths are out, it doesn't use any fifths, but it uses, like, in JI terms, like 9/8, and then 10/9 from that one to the next one, and then like an 11/8. So basically it has like a 1/1, a 9/8, a 5/4, and an 11/8 stacked in it, which sounds really good in 13 because the fifth is not there. And it's a chorale sort of using that scale and moving around. And vertically, I don't know if there's anything that's super grating, just a little bit. Maybe you might think it's more grating. It seems like one of those things that if you're used to Zen, you'd just be like, oh, that's a cool Zen thing. And if you're not used to Zen, you might be like, oh, my little ears. But some of the horizontal movements are Zen in a fun way. 21. Gotta dig into 21 more. Don't know that tuning nearly enough, but I loved using it in the iridescent Wunsch fugue, and I'm looking forward to the hell that is notating that so that all my music is notated. Yes, you heard me right. There is a plan, hopefully, to go back through my past works and organize them and notate them, because far too many people don't know that I like did something 10 years ago, either because they haven't listened to it or haven't analyzed it, or I didn't like put it in blinking letters in a way that's obvious enough. Like, and people will be like, hey, has anyone ever used the Godzilla scale in a funny sketch? I kid you not. They're going to be saying that in 5 years, and I'll still be like gesturing to like all the things I've done in it and being like, is that not enough? It didn't come out yesterday, so it doesn't matter. Um, that's how I feel a lot of the time. Um, so like it's very funny. Like there was 1 month in what was it, like September, where every week, literally, someone had come in with a question like, hey, has anyone ever done thing that Steven did 5 years ago in a really obvious way that might even be popular? One of those things. So yeah. Okay, 25, amazing major thirds. Love the 5-tone structure. 30, really fun to work with because it's not 31. 32 is kind of the same way. 31 is so, it's so in the mainstream now that doing something that's zen to it feels really satisfying. And I've made music in 32. I think 30 might even be rarer than 32, which makes it exciting because I made like 3 things in 32. John Moriarty has made like 1 thing. And then there's been like a few other things here and there. They're not very, it's very uncommon, but it's a cool tuning. There's lots of really neat scales you can get out of it that I feel like you might not be able to get out of other tunings, even though I don't know the MOSs offhand. And then 30, maybe the only thing I know of in 30 is like one obscure movement of a multi-movement piece that Clem Fortuna wrote. That is obscure, everyone. That is obscure. 30? 30? It's so underused. And it looks horrible on paper as well. So that makes sense. Kind of like 20. So I view 30 as a lot like 20 in a lot of ways, except that I enjoy 20 more than 30. But I do want to get to 30 because of its rarity. I almost haven't used it at all. I've only tried messing around with it once, and I haven't even tried the notation aspect of it. Okay, 36 is great for 6th tones. Yay. 41's got some JI going on. 43, 45, 48, and 54, those are all big tunings. So they all sound kind of similar, but those ones are picked because they kind of fit really well. And obviously 48 is like 36, where it's used by, academic groups of Western microtonalists, where like they take 12 and they multiply it by a number. So it's quite useful for that reason. And 45 is really neat because it's got 15 tone equal temperament in it and 19 tone equal temperament in it. And it's got a lot of other stuff that I'm excited to explore. Too much to talk about. 54. You know why 54 is in there? Because it's like 45, I think, actually. Let me just look this up to make sure I'm right. Actually, maybe we can have fact checkers here. Oh my gosh, it's Jacob. Hi, Jacob. We need a Zen harmonic search engine. No kidding. Yeah, I think we even just need that for normal music, riffing off of your idea there. Like, it's something for musicians where, like, I can Google something like pop songs that are really easy that have a descending minor third, and then, like, get songs. And, like, you can kind of do that now, but it's not like in a database way, right? Like people maybe have noticed that and made a video about it, and you might get those overdone songs or something. Like I think there was a musical dictionary source that like Ball State had for older music that I would use sometimes to like go and look up like songs that have this musical theme in it. Like the songs are actually organized by the themes, and you don't just find them based on like what random people know or what you've noticed. That would be really interesting and useful. 41 is exactly too low and too high. 41 is too low. I totally agree. If you can't get custom frets and have a lot of guitars, multiples of 12 are very useful. Yes, by the way, that's another fun fact. For those of you who don't know about the kite guitars, I'm sure all of you do. Kite guitars and skip fretting make 41 really useful. So I should have rated it higher, but people keep using 41 in really similar ways. Not that I don't like that. I think that's great. But like I love putting a tuning in front of someone where like they have no choice but to be zen. Like Easily Blackwood with tunings that don't have major and minor triads. I think that results in just really catastrophically interesting, colorful experiences. Okay, let me look up this one thing to see if I'm right really fast, because I think I should be. Okay, Zen Harmonic Wiki, and then I thought it was 45. Maybe not. Oh, 45 is kind of a dual fifth system. And then 54 is also a dual fifth system. So I tried to put in equal temperaments in this tier that I'm interested in exploring because dual fifths mean that you can sort of operate on different lines of logic or switch between them, and you get like a weird snap as something strange happens. 54 in particular was really interesting to me because as I was going through every equal temperament notation up to 72 and figured out how to notate everything in the best way for myself instead of just trusting what other people said, I noticed that there are some equal temperaments that are like really high up that still have two notation schemes listed. So like, dual fifths, they go farther than you think, and 54 is really special for that reason. Now, of course, in all of the circumstances that I discovered, it's best to use the best fifth, except maybe 66. So that's another interesting one. But I haven't heard anything in it or tried to use it at all, so I can't justifiably put it on here. Yes, I've already talked about 17. Parsed it as 43 tones to get sufficient resolution to imitate human speech. I wonder if anything in the 40s range suffices. Yes, I would believe so. I would tentatively say yes. Okay, so A tier, 28, 30, 32, 35. Wait a second. 30 and 32 are in two tiers. How did that happen? I think 30 and 32 should be in the A tier instead of the S tier. So that is my mistake, gang. They somehow got up there, and I posted it as fast as I could without thinking, because I am constantly doing the work of three people, and it's exhausting. So that's where that is. I think 30 and 32 are interesting to me for a lot of the same reasons that 28 is, which is like I haven't quite figured out the resources inside it yet, and it's very rarely used. It's interesting how that happens with these even number tunings, isn't it? Like I was trying to work. There's a piece I'm writing on the lumitone in 28 tone equal temperament the other day, and man, it is so zen. It is so out there. It's absolutely ridiculous. And then I was toying with like different like sixths and fourths to like get like the most zen one and figure out how it lines up right. So I think with these more far out tunings, it's harder to know immediately how the zen harmonic thing you've created is different from 12 and being able to articulate that. That doesn't mean it's bad. It just means it's more of a challenge and the work is more interesting, but you can still get there for sure. So that's how I feel about 28. That's how I feel about 30. That's how I feel about 32. Having the least experience with 30 and probably the most experience with 32 and planning to write something in 28 very soon that my wife called, quote, playful. Okay, I think 35. I don't like the notation for 35, but it's really interesting because you could notate it either as 5 tet or 7 tet. And 7 tet is mildly easier, even though I wish 5 tet was easier because I like 5 tet frameworks more, as evidenced by this tier list. Hey, I wonder if I can replace YouTube images. If I can do that, I'll go through here and nix 30 and 32 from S tier and just keep them in A tier. Okay, 42 is absolute hell to read on paper, which is a great pro and a great con. It's a pro because it looks cursed, and it's a con because it's harder to work with. There's a lot of tunings where, based on the notation system, I can kind of figure out what's happening and audiate it and everything. And man, 42 is so hard because it's got so many arrows, and they correspond to things that I would not think would happen. Like, like G to like A 3 arrows up being like bigger than a minor third or something. I don't know. I probably said that wrong, which proves my point that it's quite a lot to work with. 44, that could be interesting, but I haven't heard much that's super interesting in it yet, other than that Brian Deister improv that somehow kind of like tunes some of the chords a bit more just than they ordinarily would be in 22. That's an interesting use of an inconsistent layout. But yeah, someone was talking about how it's kind of like 22 times 2. And that's interesting. You could domain shift 22. But yeah, I guess like if you just asked me like what's interesting about 44 EDO, I would like struggle to come up with something that makes me like, ooh, I'm really jazzed for it compared to other tunings. So that's why it's a bit lower. 49 is also hell to read, just like 42. So I would sort of put it in a similar category where it's really cursed. But I actually am really interested in exploring its diatonic scale. It seems like an interesting new intonation to me. In 53, oh, 53 is so low. I know everyone hates that. But let me explain. Whenever I try to use 53 with ups and downs, it tends to just not look good on paper. Like it's almost, and it's so, I want to say it's like a Turkish music subdivision, right? That you could use with microtonal notation, even though they might not think of 53 equally divided notes. And their notation, I think, probably makes more sense than ups and downs notation. But it's just like inconsistent with that. So you have to like, I think, make these allowances where, like you say, for xenharmonic tunings, just you know, use the best notated solution in ups and downs because it's the easiest. And then if people are already using something else that works perfectly well, and can be used for chromatic music, then use that. So I also haven't studied it, but I suspect that the 53 tone equal temper notation for Turkish music is not built for chromaticism entirely. Like I know it moves notes by certain commas so that you can hit those in between spots correctly, but I don't know if like you could enumerate like every pitch class even. Like maybe you can. And I'm probably completely wrong. I haven't studied this enough. But anyway, yeah, 53, I think I would give it the same criticism as I give things like 22 and 27, which is that it sounds really the same. Every time anyone uses it, they're always using the JI chords, and it's so like on the nose, and it doesn't feel exploratory at all. It just feels like people are glad that finally they have an equal temperament that's big enough to do 5-limit JI, which is great. But like there's more stuff in the world. At least that's how I feel about it. I will say one absolutely blazing 53 tet piece is Lois Lancaster's use of Orwell 9 in it, in Agorano. That is absolutely fire. That's the coolest thing I've heard in 53. Not all the JI stuff that I could like probably play in 12, but it would just sound a little worse. Okay, C tier. We got 7, 8, 12, 24, which is great. Yes. Yeah, that actually is a really good characteristic of it. But I like breaking out of it. So that's why I put 53 in the lowly A tier, since it's such a great tuning. I think I already talked about the C and F tier at the beginning. They're just so little. 12 and 24. I trust other people to get to those. I personally don't want to use 7 and 8 very much, but I definitely would use it if I was in a situation where people were playing music in it or using it. Like I'm not like I don't hate any of these tunings. All of these tunings are great. A lot of this tier list I would describe as like just my personal journey with like what tunings I like to use, and what sort of stuff I want to explore, and it's completely subjective. And like some of it is based in factual knowledge and observation, but a lot of it isn't. Like some of these are barely deserve a spot because I don't know them that much. Like I don't know 46 and 50 nearly as well as I know like 15 and 19. So really, you should regard this as something that's very, it's very undone. It's very unfinished. And I could be probably convinced out of a lot of these rankings, but it was fun to ramble about it for a while. Unfortunately, I probably have to go. Ooh, message retracted. Sounds spicy. Let's see. 12 EDO is too low. You're exactly right. Make your own tier list and do better than me. 24 is just the composite boringness of 12 with 8 EDO stapled to it. Well, you don't even have to say the 8 EDO part. Not that 24 is boring. I don't think it's boring. I just trust other people to get to it. And I do think it's like tunings that force certain usages. I think those like they don't actually mean that there are less possibilities in the tuning, but it means that like if somebody is going to try it, I'm like, "Oh, I know what they're going to do. They're probably going to do this or this." And there's like two things. So 24 EDO, I feel like a lot of the things that people make are either modern music because it's 12 times 2, and that's fine. That's great. Or music where like you have 12 and then you switch to the crack and do something in that crack and come back to 12. And I think that latter category can be really tonal and effective. So like I don't know if you've heard Fast song Headcase. I think I already posted about it in the comments here. But that is a great example of like what pop music in 24 should be. Not Jacob Collier barely doing a modulation in a song like 5 years after his good era and then taking out the modulation in his live performance. There should be like, real relationship, real dialogue in between the two. Oh, you know what would be really interesting? I think I've heard this in Nice Tone's music. Nice Tone, who's like in the Staff Cert collective, who makes like electronic music. They've used 24 tone music where it's mostly like things in the same 12th tet place, like happening with each other at the same time. But there are some anticipations and other situations where the frameworks cross just slightly. And then Easily Blackwood's 24 note canon also does that. So I'd be really interested in people exploring that more in 24. And of course, Dave Fiozinski's music in 24, needs no explanation. It's insanely zen. We talk about it on Now and Zen. And it's 24. So, 24 is really great. I definitely recommend using it. I just, there's other tunings for me to use. So that's why I put it in C tier, because other people who figure out what tuning is, the first thing they try is going to be probably 24. But it might not even be as easy as 19 to talk about with musicians. Every single musician I've ever interacted with who doesn't know about microtonality has had an easier time from 19 than from 24. But I'm sure there's certain circumstances that I'm not aware of, like putting a keyboard in front of you, musician, and then putting another one in front of them that's 50 cents apart. That's a specific circumstance where 24 would obviously be easier, right? So, like, since I haven't done that particular act, I have a biased experience because I'm showing up with the 19-tone instruments and with like a whiteboard that I can write on, time for explanation. So you also have to understand how much those circumstances affect this list and your perception of any tuning list. Like what you have done in the real world matters so much. All right, here we go. Last few comments and then I am out. I don't know if I should delete this one or not. It's kind of fun. I might keep it. Who knows? Let's see. I'll stop finding 12 EDO boring once everyone stops using the same 4 chords. Oh my god, same. I really wish people would try harder. Like, that's why I love the Lemon Twigs. It's like, oh, they're trying to they're trying to use chord progressions that are interesting, and almost no one else is. It's great. Or like Elton John, maybe, if he's lucky, Have you heard Brent Rogers' music? Yes, actually, I have. And his music, I did not realize that it was in 53. So I will have to go back to that and revisit it. They chord max on those as a way to test how long they can squeeze money out of people before they start to notice all of it's the same. Yeah. And then every few years comes around and then people have forgotten what's happened. And so they can sort of endlessly keep recycling the same ideas to be fresh, because you want to be just fresh enough to break in, but you can't actually be challenging, because then that would disrupt the model. Not a moneymaker. There are 1 chord songs in 24 that are really interesting. So 4 chords is plenty for 12. Yeah. Let's see. Fast has some great 24. Absolutely. Let's see. King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizards 24. Rattlesnake is again a nice 1 chord song. Yeah. Exposed a lot of people to microtonality. Here's the thing that I've noticed. King Gizzard and Jacob Collier are so mainstream that people associate microtonality with them, just like their names are just lumped with that. And it's funny because back in an earlier era, before 31 was the Instagram tuning, and before Adam Neely had given up on doing microtonal videos, Adam Neely replaced King Gizzard. Because if there's room for 2 people that should be associated with microtonality for doing things very, very occasionally, it was Jacob Collier and Adam Neely. And then Adam Neely faded out and it got replaced with King Gizzard because they did that other album. I really love how it's great that Jacob Collier is doing microtonality. It's amazing. I really hope, he inspired me, and I hope a lot of other people, see his videos, and they're like, yes, let's do microtonal stuff. We can do it. That's what I thought. I will say Rick Beato was the interesting holdout in the music theory community where, every single person who's made a video on microtonality who's pretty popular, they probably just have Jacob Collier in there because they have to say his name or the YouTube algorithm won't care. And I think that's really stupid. And Rick Beato was the only holdout. And he said, forget microtones, check out polychromatics, which is a little dumb because polychromatics are microtones. But it was nice to see someone not just say, hey, Jacob Collier is our microtonal king. Have you heard? YouTube views go through the roof. Person has said something new. Nothing new, sorry. The YouTube economy is happy. Everything's great. But then Rick Beato was like, check out Dolores Catharino, and it was cool. Also, Adam Neely mentioned Sevish in his videos, which I thought was interesting as well. Good luck going mainstream without 31. Yeah, it's possible. Hey, there's lots of people using 24 that are pretty popular. Hey, Omar Suleiman, really cool artist, uses 24 all the time. Okay, great. I think that is a stream, everyone. So I will see you later. Thanks for all showing up. I'm glad that talking about the tier list was fun. And I will see you all later. Bye bye.